Yes, Grams, joined as always by King Jemison. Thank you so much for being here again. And we're going to start this off with the elephant in the room, right? It's pretty clear now that Stanford is the reason that the Pac-12 is being held up from playing. Seems maybe we might get some games in about 6 weeks. But I want to ask, how will this short ramp up to the season, if it is just 6 weeks, how will that affect Stanford? King?
Daniel, I think it's safe to say that Stanford is in a much worse position for this short ramp up than almost any other school in the Pac-12 because we don't know what Stanford's players are up to right now. They were sent home. They were not kept on campus. They were not brought back to campus a month ago. There was no preparation for a restart. I mean, it frankly wasn't a real question in the Pac-12 until the Big Ten decided to resume play. But once that happened, the rest of the Pac-12 schools, or not the rest, but the majority, were ready to go. 6 weeks is enough time. They can get on the field and save this season. Stanford may not be in that position because they're treating this thing a little bit differently. And they're treating it as if regular students can't be on campus, then athletes can't be on campus either. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. But in general, that's what we've seen their philosophy throughout this entire pandemic and really throughout the history of Stanford athletics. And that's coming back to bite them in their preparation for this very strange season.
Yeah, initially I was totally with you. I'm actually really scared. I don't know what Stanford's going to look like. But if we give them that they're going to be healthy and they're going to be physically able to start the season, which is definitely not a sure thing, I think it may actually look good. I think this may give them an opportunity to streamline their offense a little bit. I think Davis Mills is a very heady quarterback, but if his offense is pared down a little bit, because we know how many checks the line that KJ Costello was doing. But if Davis Mills has some of that taken off his plate, here, we only have 6 weeks. We're not trying to install a big offense. We'll make it a little bit more simple. I think that could actually play in Stanford's favor a lot. And then we do have to go back to the spring. And Stanford did have that spring practice that a lot of other schools in the Pac-12 didn't have. They had a few weeks. They played a little bit. Obviously, it's been a long time since then. But I think you have to look at those weeks as potentially aiding Stanford right now. But you're totally right, King. It is a little bit worrying, especially with how few people are expected to be in game shape.
Well, I love some of the points you just made, and that's a rare thing for me, so, enjoy it. But first of all, since you mentioned KJ Costello, I want to say I'm super excited to see him get out of that way too complex offense and do what he does best, which is throw the football in Mike Leach's offense this weekend. So, side note for Stanford fans, but tune in to watch KJ Costello play an LSU defense that who knows how good they're going to be. But anyway, we're going to see how good that guy really is because before, obviously his 2018 season was amazing, but he was under this almost burdensome offense, which is what you're talking about. Well, you just can't do that. If Stanford decides to try to run that type of offense in this short of a season, it's not going to work. They're never going to get off the ground. So you have to pare it down, and I do think that plays into Davis Mills' strengths and the strengths of really all the skill position players on this Cardinal roster because you do have some dudes who can do something when they have the football in their hands. So I don't disagree with you on that point, but the first thing is you got to get people back on campus. You got to get them ready, and you have to do that safely, so you have to leave time for quarantining. I think the daily testing is going to make this far safer, reduces infectiousness by 100%, because if you get a negative test, you physically cannot spread the illness. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Doc, but I think that's true. So if you can test people daily, then I think you can play football safely. But you got to get people back on campus now so that they can play safely injury-wise, so that they're not going to be putting themselves in a position where they're going to go out and get hurt because they did not have enough time to prepare for this season.
And that's what it's going to keep coming back to. It's going to be how much are they going to be able to ramp up in those 6 weeks? What has their off-season weights program looked like? Honestly, at this point, we don't really know. We know they were back on campus for a little bit preparing for a season, but that since then they've really taken it in off-season mode where a lot of different players are off campus. Many players went home. We have no idea what they're doing. We have no idea what it would look like. We hear David Shaw working really hard. He's talking about today he's working with Sarah Cody and the Santa Clara to try and get approval, but we have no idea when they would be back, what it would look like, what kind of different precautions would be in place, if they would be able to get in and get after it, right? Because Stanford still that element of ground and pound. And that is something they're not going to be able to practice, at least not initially. They haven't practiced that for a long time. I don't expect the offensive line to have gotten the reps that they needed necessarily, especially as they try and integrate a lot of new pieces, because a lot of the people that were out last year coming back this year, but they're going to be around new players. And same thing on the defensive line, which is maybe one of the biggest weaknesses of this team that we've talked about before, we're really worried about. So how does it look when they're finally able to get back? So there's some reasons to think that maybe Stanford can get after it and be ready in 6 weeks. But as you've been saying, a lot of reasons to be really, really worried for Stanford.
And you really got to feel for the players because they were told that their season was off. They were waiting to the spring. And if David Shaw can be believed, his players were fine with that. They were, in fact, happy with that. They felt like the Pac-12 was protecting them. They would have a chance to fully prepare for a spring season. Well, now they're not getting that. And frankly, the truth is they're not going to get a spring season either. So it's now or never. And you are putting people in a very difficult position by bringing them back to campus with such late notice. And RJ Abadia of the Bootleg reported that players are being asked to provide their own housing for the next little bit as Stanford prepares for the transition. Not only are they living off campus, they're having to pay for it. And if that is true, I think that is absolutely abhorrent behavior by Stanford athletics. You have to find a loophole to get around athletes having to pay for their own housing. That's unfair. If you're not going to pay them for their own name, image, and likeness, which is ridiculous to begin with, then you have to provide for all the costs associated with being an athlete. And currently, Stanford's not even doing that. And the media article is one I think we should address, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that because I think it does position Stanford as really the outlier amongst the Pac-12 in a return-to-play situation.
Yeah, it's really worrisome. It's definitely viewing Stanford as kind of this elitist mindset that they want to make sure that if maybe the students aren't coming back, the football team isn't coming back either, which in the abstract makes a lot of sense. To me, as a non-athlete, as a NARP, makes a lot of sense that everyone would be treated equally. But at the same time, football players are providing a service that simply you and I are not. And maybe they deserve that. They deserve clearly to be paid for their NIL. But all of these other things like off-campus housing in this time where they're being asked on one hand, please be around, keep in game shape, and on the other, like, go home, like online classes, you have no need to be here. So it's very, very much a predicament for Stanford. Honestly, I don't know the right answer here. I think you could definitely follow what all the other Pac-12 campuses are doing, and that may be right in one book. And in another, what Stanford's doing, holding the athletes back, that could be right. I don't honestly know. I don't.
I'm prepared to say that I do know the right answer. Stanford needs to come back and play. If the rest of the Pac-12 plays and Stanford does not, it is going to be a disaster for Stanford athletics. And now with the daily testing, I believe it can be done safely. It's actually safer since you don't have other students on campus, so you're going to get much less exposure to the surrounding community. You can't quite make it a bubble like the NBA, but it's going to be as close to a bubble as you can get in college sports in Palo Alto. So the health concerns are not as big as they were before for me. And on the other side of it, you just cannot let the Pac-12 leave you behind. It'll push Stanford back years. It will destroy all the progress they made in the 2010s of becoming a college football powerhouse. Because if you're a recruit and you see that 11 Pac-12 schools played and one didn't, and that one was Stanford, which is already a very complex process to get into, a much more arduous recruiting process than these other schools are presenting, I don't even know if you're looking at them anymore. I mean, it is just going to completely change the culture of Stanford athletics. And it would show that Stanford has no institutional investment in athletics, which I'm already worrying about the institutional investment as is. And I think that this would show that athletics are not a priority. And if you show that athletics are not a priority, you are no longer going to be able to compete at the highest level. And that would just be a shame because having great sports alongside maybe the world's best academics is what makes Stanford great. You can't pull the two apart. They are one and the same of this university experience that is different than anything else you'll get anywhere else in the world.
I truly do agree with